Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, staring out at the stars through the massive viewing window. The coffee in his hand had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. His mind was focused on the routine patrol reports coming in from the outer solar system. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. "Admiral, we're getting some strange readings from the deep space sensors," said Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez from her station. Her voice carried a hint of worry that made Jake turn around quickly. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to Amy's console. The screens showed dozens of blinking dots appearing at the edge of their sensor range. "Unknown contacts." "Sir, they just appeared out of nowhere. The computers can't identify them." Amy's fingers danced across her controls, trying to get clearer readings. "Sir, there are a lot of them." Jake felt his stomach tighten. In his 20 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. "How many is a lot?" "Still counting, sir. Over 200 so far, and more keep appearing." Amy looked up at him with wide eyes. "Admiral, these ships are huge. Each one is at least 10 miles long." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Jake had trained for this moment his entire career, but now that it was happening, he felt unprepared. "Sound General Quarters. Get me a connection to Earth Command immediately." Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their battle stations. Jake watched the main screen as more and more unknown contacts appeared. The dots formed a perfect pattern around Earth, like a giant cage. On Earth, Dr. Kevin Walsh was enjoying a quiet evening in his laboratory when his emergency communicator started screaming. He nearly dropped his dinner as he reached for the device. "Walsh here," he said, still chewing his sandwich. "Kevin, we need you at the command center right now," came the voice of General Patricia Davis. "We have a situation." Kevin grabbed his coat and ran for the door. The United Nations Space Command headquarters was only 10 minutes away, but tonight it felt like hours. When he arrived, the building was buzzing with activity. People were running everywhere, and he could hear shouting. From multiple rooms, he found General Davis in the main control room, standing in front of a wall covered with screens. Each screen showed the same thing, hundreds of massive ships surrounding Earth. "My God," Kevin whispered. "Are they real?" "Very real," Davis replied. "They appeared 30 minutes ago. We've tried every form of communication we know, but they're not responding." Lisa Harper, the best communications specialist in the fleet, was working frantically at a nearby console. Wires and cables covered her desk as she tried different frequencies and signal types. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked. "Anything yet, Lisa?" Kevin asked. "Nothing. They're definitely scanning us, but they won't talk back. I've tried. Everything, radio, laser, quantum signals, even old Morse code." She looked frustrated and tired to dot back in space. Jake watched as his fleet of 12 ships moved into defensive positions around Earth. It felt like bringing toy boats to fight a hurricane. The alien ships were not just large, they were beautiful, in a terrifying way. Their hulls looked like they were grown rather than built, with smooth curves and organic shapes that reminded him of sleeping dragons. "Admiral, the alien ships are moving," Amy reported. "They're tightening their formation." Jake could see it on the main screen. The massive vessels were slowly moving closer to Earth, maintaining their perfect spherical arrangement. Whatever these beings wanted, they were making sure Earth couldn't escape. "Sir, incoming transmission," called out Communications Officer Billy Chun from his station. "It's not from the aliens. It's from the outer colonies." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The screen filled with the worried face of Captain Nancy Torres from the Mars Orbital Station. "Admiral Morrison, we're tracking the alien fleet from here." "Sir, they just did something to Phobos." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew. One of their ships fired some kind of beam at the moon. Phobos is gone. Sir, completely vaporized. There's nothing left but dust. The bridge went completely silent. Phobos was one of Mars' 2 moons, a chunk of rock about 14 miles across. The fact that the aliens could destroy it with a single shot meant their weapons were beyond anything humans could imagine. Thank you, Captain Torres. Keep monitoring and report any changes. Jake ended the transmission and turned to Amy. Analysis? Sir? If they can destroy Phobos that easily, our entire fleet wouldn't last 5 minutes against them. Amy's voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. Down on Earth, the alien ships were now visible to the naked eye as tiny points of light moving slowly across the night sky. People all over the world had stopped what they were doing to stare upward. News reports were spreading panic as governments tried to figure out what to do. In the command center, Kevin and Lisa were still working to establish contact when every screen in the room suddenly changed. The alien ships were transmitting. I've got something, Lisa shouted. They're sending us a signal. It's complex, but I think I can decode it. Kevin rushed to her side as symbols and patterns filled her screens. The signal was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Part mathematics, part music, and part something else entirely. It took Lisa 20 minutes of intense work to break through the encoding. When the message finally came through, it was imperfect. English. Surrender your world. Resistance is extinction. The room fell silent. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying. There was no negotiation offered, no explanation given. Just a demand and a threat. General Davis was the first to speak. How long do we have? Lisa checked her instruments. The signal is repeating every hour. I think they're giving us time to consider their offer. Kevin stared at the message on the screen. This changes everything. They're not here to explore or make friends. They want our planet. Back on the Valiant, Jake received the same message. He gathered his senior officers in the briefing room to discuss their options. The room was small and cramped, with barely enough space for the 6 people around the table. Options? Jake asked, though he knew there weren't many good ones. We could try to negotiate, suggested Commander Steve Palmer, the ship's tactical officer. Maybe they want something we can give them without surrendering the planet. Or we could fight, said Amy. Go down swinging. Jake looked around the table at his officers. These were good people, trained professionals who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth. Now they faced an enemy that could destroy moons with single shots. Fighting might be suicide, Jake said quietly, but surrendering might be worse. At least if we fight, we die free. As if the aliens had heard their conversation, every human ship in the fleet suddenly detected new movement from the alien vessels. One of the massive dragon-like ships was separating from the formation and moving toward Earth's moon. Jake and his crew watched in horror as the alien ship positioned itself near Luna and fired a brief pulse of energy. The moon's surface lit up like a Christmas tree as the beam carved a message into the lunar rock. The message was visible from Earth with the naked eye. 24 hours. The aliens had given humanity 1 day to decide the fate of their world. Surrender and live as slaves, or resist and face extinction. Jake looked out at the alien fleet surrounding his home and made a decision that would change the course of human history. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Prepare for battle. President Helen Carter stood in the Oval Office, staring at the red phone that connected her directly to the military command center. The past 12 hours had been the longest of her life. Reports were coming in from around the world. Panic. In the streets, governments falling apart, and millions of people fleeing cities in terror. Madam President, said her Chief of Staff, Robert Kim, as he entered the room, the Joint Chiefs are here for the emergency meeting. Helen nodded and followed him down to the secure bunker beneath the White House. The room was filled with the most powerful people in the country, all looking to her for answers she didn't have. General Davis was already there, along with Admiral Morrison, via video link from his ship. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "What are options?" Helen asked, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Limited, Madam President," replied General Davis. "Our conventional weapons are useless against their technology. However, we do have one possibility." She activated a holographic display that showed a complex diagram. Project Prometheus. We've been developing it in secret for the past 5 years. It's based on theoretical physics that most scientists said was impossible. Dr. Sandra Mitchell, the head of the project, stepped forward. She was a small woman with wild gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. The project uses quantum mechanics to create weapons that exist in multiple dimensions at once. In theory, they could bypass conventional defenses. In theory? Helen asked. "We've never tested them against anything like this," Sandra admitted. "But they're the only weapons we have that might work." Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Brooks was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his career. His ship, the UES Shadow, was humanity's most advanced stealth vessel. It was small, fast, and almost invisible to most sensors. If anyone could get close to the alien ships and survive, it was Ryan and his crew. "Final systems check," Ryan called out to his team. The Shadow's bridge was cramped, with barely enough room for 4 people, but every inch of space was used efficiently. "Stealth systems online," reported engineer Sofia Martinez from her station. She was young but brilliant, having designed half the ship's invisibility technology herself. "Weapons ready?" added Tyler Johnson, the ship's weapons specialist. He was a big man with gentle eyes who could make any gun sing. "Though I'm not sure what good they'll do against those monsters." "Sensors are calibrated," finished Dr. Ellen Ross, their science officer. "We'll get every bit of data we can from those ships." Ryan looked at his crew. They were volunteers, every one of them. They knew this mission was probably suicide, but they had signed up anyway. "Remember, our job is to learn, not to fight. We get close, we scan, we get out. Information is more valuable than heroics right now." The Shadow slipped away from the main fleet, using the darkness between planets to hide its approach. Ryan had chosen a route that would take them through the asteroid belt, using the rocks as cover. It would take longer, but it was their best chance of getting close without being detected. Back on Earth, Dr. Maya Patel was working on a completely different approach. She was a quantum physicist who specialized in communication theory, and she had an idea that might just be crazy enough to work. "Alex, look at this," she said to her colleague, Dr. Alex Thompson. They were in her laboratory at MIT, surrounded by computers and equipment that most people couldn't even pronounce. "What am I looking at?" Alex asked, staring at the screens. "Full of equations. The alien ships. They're not just using normal communications. They're using quantum entanglement to coordinate their movements. Every ship is connected to every other ship instantaneously." Maya's voice was excited. "If we could disrupt that connection ... the whole fleet would lose coordination," Alex finished. "Maya, you're brilliant. But how do we do it?" "We use Earth's quantum communication network. We've been building it for years to connect our cities and satellites. If we can modify it to create a feedback loop, we might be able to jam their signals." Alex looked skeptical. "That's assuming their technology works the same way ours does." "Only one way to find out," Maya replied, already starting to work on the modifications. Captain Brooks and his crew were now deep in the asteroid belt, moving slowly between the rocks. The alien ships were just ahead, their massive forms blocking out the stars. Up close, They were even more impressive and terrifying. "My God," whispered Sophia. "They're not just ships. They're alive." She was right. The alien vessels had organic curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own life. What they had thought were metal hulls were actually some kind of living tissue, tough as steel but flexible as skin. "Scanning now," Helen reported. "The energy readings are off the charts. These ships are generating power levels that should be impossible." "Are you getting this?" Ryan asked. "Every bite," Helen confirmed. "Ryan, these ships are part biological, part mechanical. It's like they grew them instead of building them." Tyler was monitoring the weapon systems. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of defensive grid around each ship. It's not shields like we know them. It's more like an immune system." Before Ryan could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the shadow. They had been detected. "3 alien ships closing on our position," Sophia reported. "They're moving fast." "So much for stealth," Ryan muttered. "All power to engines. Get us out of here." The shadow raced through the asteroid belt with 3 alien ships in pursuit. The alien vessels moved like living things, flowing around obstacles instead of avoiding them. They were gaining rapidly. "They're not shooting," Tyler observed. "Why? Aren't they shooting?" "Maybe they want us alive," Ellen suggested. The chase continued for 20 minutes before the shadow finally escaped by hiding in the shadow of a large asteroid. The alien ships searched for another hour before giving up and returning to their positions. "Did we get what we came for?" Ryan asked. "More than we hoped for," Ellen replied. "These ships are definitely part organic. And Captain, I think I know why they're not shooting at us. They don't see us as a threat. We're like insects to them." Back on Earth, the first human counterattack was about to begin. Every nuclear weapon on the planet had been loaded onto missiles and aimed at the alien fleet. It was humanity's biggest punch, and everyone knew it would probably be their last. President Carter stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the countdown. Around the world, people watched the skies, hoping and praying that somehow their weapons would work. "Launch sequence initiated," announced the weapons officer. All missiles away. Hundreds of nuclear weapons streaked toward the alien ships, leaving trails of fire across the night sky. The missiles were humanity's most powerful weapons, each one capable of destroying a city. Surely they would at least damage the alien vessels. Missiles reached their targets and detonated in brilliant flashes of light. For a moment, it looked like the attack had worked. The explosions were visible from the ground, turning night into day. But when the light faded, the alien ships were still there, completely undamaged. "Negative effect," reported the weapons officer in a stunned voice. "No damage to target vessels." The alien response was swift and terrible. 3 beams of light reached down from the alien ships and touched 3 major cities: New York, London, and Tokyo. Where the beams touched, everything simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not burned, just gone. Millions of people vanished in seconds. "My God," whispered President Carter. "What have we done?" Admiral Morrison watched the destruction from his ship and felt something break inside him. They had thrown everything they had at the aliens, and it hadn't even scratched them. Now 3 cities were gone, and the aliens were sending another message. "Signal coming in," reported Amy Rodriguez. Her voice was shaking. The message was simple: 18 hours. Remain. Jake looked at his fleet of ships and realized they were out of options. Their weapons were useless, their stealth was meaningless, and their enemy could destroy entire cities with a thought. But giving up wasn't an option either. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Prepare for close combat. If we're going to die, we're going to make them remember us." On Earth, Dr. Patel was working frantically to complete her quantum disruption device. The alien demonstration had shown her that conventional weapons were useless. But maybe, just maybe, her plan could work. "Alex, I need more power," she called out. "We need to amplify the signal 1,000 times." Maya, that much power could destroy the entire network, Alex warned. "Then we better make sure it works the first time," Maya replied. Across the planet, people were making their own preparations. Some were fleeing to remote areas, hoping to hide. Others were gathering in churches and temples, praying for a miracle. But most were just spending time with their families, knowing that tomorrow might be their last day on Earth. In the darkness of space, the alien ships continued their silent vigil around Earth. They had demonstrated their power, delivered their ultimatum, and now they waited. They had done this same dance around dozens of worlds, and it always ended the same way, but they had never encountered humans before. And humans had a habit of surprising everyone, including themselves. Dr. Emma Foster had been living in the Deep Ocean Research Station for 3 months when the world changed forever. The station sat on the ocean floor, 2 miles below the surface, where she studied the strange life forms that lived in the deepest parts of the sea. She had no idea that alien ships had surrounded Earth until her communication system started screaming with emergency signals. "What's happening up there?" she asked her research partner, Dr. Carl Lewis, as they watched the news. "Feeds from the surface. The end of the world, apparently," Carl replied, his face pale as he read the reports. "Alien ships, destroyed cities. They're giving us 18 hours to surrender." Emma felt sick. She had dedicated her life to studying life in the deep ocean, far from the politics and problems of the surface world. Now it seemed like none of that mattered anymore. "Emma, look at this," Carl called from his monitoring station. "The seismic sensors are going crazy. Something's happening on the ocean floor." Emma rushed to the sensors and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The electromagnetic pulses from the alien weapon strikes were causing massive reactions in the deepest parts of the ocean. Structures that had been dormant for millions of years were suddenly coming to life. "Carl, we need to get the submersible ready. I have to see this for myself." "Are you crazy? There's a war going on up there." "Which is exactly why we need to understand what's happening down here," Emma replied. Already pulling on her diving suit, the submersible descended into the deepest trench in the ocean, its lights cutting through the darkness like tiny stars. Emma had made this journey hundreds of times, but today felt different. The water itself seemed to be humming with energy. "Depth 4,000 meters in descending," Carl reported from the surface station. "Emma, the energy readings are off." "The chart's down there." Emma could see it now. Massive structures rising from the ocean floor like underwater mountains. But these weren't natural formations. They were clearly artificial, made from some kind of material that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "Carl, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm seeing it, but I don't believe it. Those structures are at least 1,000,000 years old, but they're showing signs of active technology." As Emma got closer, she could see that the structures were covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. Submersible's instruments were detecting signals coming from the ancient buildings, signals that seemed to be reaching up toward the surface. "Emma, you need to get back up here right now." Carl's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm getting calls from the surface. The alien ships are reacting to whatever's happening down there." On the surface, Admiral Morrison was dealing with a crisis of his own. The alien ships had suddenly changed their behavior, moving in patterns that didn't make sense. Some were pulling back from Earth, while others were moving closer. "Amy, what's the status of the alien fleet?" he asked. "Sir, they seem to be responding to something. Half the ships are maintaining position, but the other half are moving in what looks like a defensive formation." Before Jake could respond, his Communication system lit up with an emergency call from Captain Brooks aboard the Shadow. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from Earth's oceans. Something down there is transmitting signals directly to the alien ships. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. What kind of signals? Unknown, sir, but the aliens are definitely listening. Back in the Deep Ocean Research Station, Emma was racing to understand what she had discovered. The ancient structures were not just transmitting signals. They were having a conversation with the alien ships above. Carl, I need you to patch me through to the Surface Command. They need to know about this. Within minutes, Emma found herself talking directly to Dr. Kevin Walsh at the United Nations Command Center. She quickly explained what she had found. In the deep ocean. Dr. Foster, this is incredible, Kevin said. We've been trying to understand these aliens for hours, and you might have found the key. Can you decode the signals? I'm trying, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The patterns are complex, almost like a language, but they're based on genetic sequences rather than mathematics. Kevin felt a chill run down his spine. Genetic sequences? Dr. Foster, can you send me everything you have? I think this might be more important than we realized. Emma uploaded her data to the surface and continued her exploration of the ancient structures. The deeper she went, the more complex the signals became. It was as if the structures were trying to tell her something, but she couldn't understand. The language. Carl, I'm going to try something. I'm going to send our own genetic data to the structures and see what happens. Emma, that's incredibly dangerous. We have no idea what these things are capable of. We're out of time, Carl. The aliens are going to attack soon, and this might be our only chance to understand what's happening. Emma programmed her submersible to transmit a sample of human DNA to the ancient structures. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The structures lit up like Christmas trees, and the signals they were sending changed completely. Carl, something's happening. The structures are responding to human DNA. They recognize us. On the surface, the change was even more dramatic. The alien ships that had been moving in defensive patterns suddenly stopped. For the first time since their arrival, the massive vessel seemed uncertain. Dr. Walsh was working frantically to decode the new signals when he made a discovery that changed everything. The genetic patterns in the signals matched sequences found in human DNA, but they were millions of years older. This is impossible, he muttered to himself. These sequences predate human evolution by millions of years. Lisa Harper looked up from her communication station. Kevin, I'm getting something new from the aliens. They're trying to establish a different kind of communication link. What kind of link? It's not radio or laser. It's some kind of direct neural interface. They want to communicate mind to mind. Kevin felt his blood run cold. That's incredibly dangerous. We have no idea what that kind of contact could do to a human mind. I'm willing to try, said a voice from behind them. They turned to see Dr. Paula Green, the station's chief psychologist. If this is our only chance to understand them, someone has to take the risk. Before Kevin could stop her, Paula had connected herself to the alien communication system. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she began to speak in a voice that wasn't quite her own. Children of the First Ones, she said, her voice echoing strangely. We are the keepers of the legacy. We have searched for you across the galaxy. What? Legacy? Kevin asked, hoping Paula could still hear him. The legacy of the ancestors. The first ones who seeded life throughout the galaxy. Earth is one of their garden worlds, and humans carry their genetic markers. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Kevin realized that humanity wasn't just facing an alien invasion. They were facing a family reunion with a branch of the family that had very different ideas about how things should be done. Why are you here? Kevin asked. To preserve and protect the legacy. Other worlds have been corrupted by war and hatred. We gather the children of the first ones and keep them safe in our domain. Safe from what? From themselves. From the chaos and destruction that comes when the children grow too powerful without wisdom. Emma, still exploring the ancient structures in the deep ocean, was making discoveries of her own. The structures weren't just communication devices. They were libraries. They contained the complete history of the first ones, the ancient race, that had seeded life throughout the galaxy millions of years ago. Carl, I'm seeing incredible things down here. These structures contain information about dozens of different worlds, hundreds of different species. They're all connected somehow. Connected how? Genetically? They all share common DNA sequences from the first ones. Carl, I think humans are part of a galactic family that we never knew existed. The information Emma was discovering painted a picture of a galaxy filled with life, all of it connected by the genetic legacy of an ancient race. The first ones had been incredibly advanced, but they had disappeared millions of years ago, leaving behind only their genetic gifts and these ancient monitoring stations. Emma, you need to get back to the surface immediately, Carl said urgently. The alien ships are moving again, and this time they're coming down to the ocean. Emma looked up through the water and could see lights descending from the surface. The alien ships were coming to investigate the ancient structures for themselves. Carl, I'm not leaving yet. I think I've found something that could change everything. Deep within the ancient structures, Emma had discovered a chamber that contained something extraordinary, a complete genetic map of the first ones themselves. But more than that, she had found instructions for how to activate the ancient technology. Carl, the structures aren't just libraries, they're weapons. The first ones left them here as a test. If their children ever grew powerful enough to threaten a galaxy, the structures would activate and judge whether they deserved to survive. Emma, get out of there now. The alien ships are almost on top of you. But Emma was reading the final section of the instructions, and what she found made her gasp. The test wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity had learned something the first. The alien ship that descended to the ocean floor was unlike anything Emma had ever seen. It moved through the water like a living creature, its biomechanical hull flowing and shifting as it navigated the deep currents. As it approached the ancient structures, the water around it began to glow with the same energy that pulsed through the first one's technology. Emma, please tell me you're seeing this. Carl's voice crackled through the radio from the surface station. I'm seeing it, but I still don't believe it, Emma replied, watching as the alien vessel began to communicate directly with the ancient structures. Patterns of light flowed between the ship and the underwater, buildings like a conversation between old friends. The alien ship noticed Emma's submersible, but didn't seem threatened by it. Instead, it sent out a gentle pulse of energy that somehow allowed Emma to understand what was happening. The ship was downloading information from the ancient structures, just as she had been doing. Carl, they're not trying to destroy the structures. They're learning from them, just like we are. On the surface, the remaining alien ships had arranged themselves in a new formation around Earth. Instead of the aggressive cage-like pattern they had maintained before, they were now positioned in what looked almost like a protective circle. Admiral Morrison watched the change from his bridge, trying to understand what it meant. Amy, are you getting any new communications from the alien fleet? Yes, sir, but they're different now. Instead of demands for surrender, they're sending something that looks like questions. Questions about what? About us, sir. They want to know about human history, our technology, our culture. It's like they're trying to understand who we are. Back at the United Nations Command Center, Dr. Paula Green was still connected to the alien communication system. Her consciousness was floating in a space that existed somewhere between human and alien understanding, translating concepts that had no words in any human language. They're called the Keepers, she said. her voice distant and strange. "They've been traveling the galaxy for millions of years, searching for the children of the first ones." Dr. Kevin Walsh leaned closer. "What do they want with us?" "Protection. Every other world they've found has fallen into chaos and war. The children of the first ones have incredible potential, but they also have incredible capacity for destruction. The Keepers collect them and keep them safe in preserved worlds where they can't harm themselves or others." "Safe from what?" Paula's expression changed, and for a moment, Kevin could see both human pain and alien sorrow in her eyes. "From themselves. The first ones were incredibly advanced, but they destroyed themselves in a war that almost broke the galaxy. The Keepers are trying to prevent that from happening again." Lisa Harper looked up from her communication station. "Kevin, I'm getting direct communications from the lead alien ship. They want to establish formal diplomatic contact." "With who?" "With the leaders of Earth. They're requesting a meeting." President Carter received the request while she was in the secure bunker beneath the White House. The past 24 hours had aged her 10 years, and the stress of potentially being the last president of a free Earth was taking its toll. "They want to meet?" she asked General Davis. "Yes, Madam President. They've specified that they want to meet with our political leaders, our scientists, and our military commanders. They're offering to send a representative to Earth." Helen looked around the room at her advisors. Every face showed the same mixture of hope and fear. This could be humanity's chance to avoid extinction, or it could be a trap. What does Admiral Morrison think? General Davis activated the communication link to the Valiant. Jake's tired face appeared on the screen. "Admiral, what's your assessment of this diplomatic offer?" Jake was quiet for a moment before answering. "Madam President, I think we have to try. Our weapons are useless against them, and they've shown they could destroy us any time they want. If they're willing to talk instead of fight, we need to listen." "Very well, accept their offer." The alien representative arrived in a ship that was small by their standards, but still larger than any human vessel. It landed in the desert outside Las Vegas, far from any major population centers. The ship's landing was so gentle that it barely disturbed the sand. President Carter, Admiral Morrison, Dr. Walsh, and a dozen other leaders made the journey to the landing site. They were escorted by the best security forces humanity could provide, though everyone knew the weapons would be useless if the aliens meant harm. The representative that emerged from the ship was both beautiful and terrifying. It stood 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted color like oil on water, and eyes that held the wisdom of millions of years. Its movements were graceful and flowing, like a dancer or a predator. "I am Fleet Commander Zarathik of the Keeper Armada," it said, its voice carrying harmonics that human ears could barely process. "I speak for those who preserve the legacy of the first ones." President Carter stepped forward, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I am President Helen Carter of Earth. We welcome you to our world, though we wish the circumstances were different." Zarathik studied the human leaders with ancient eyes. "You are the children we have sought. Your genetic patterns mark you as descendants of the first ones. But you are different from the others we have found." "Different how?" Dr. Walsh asked. "You resist. Every other world we have encountered either surrendered immediately or was too primitive to understand what was happening. You chose to fight, even knowing you could not win." Admiral Morrison stepped forward. "Surrender isn't in our nature. We'd rather die free than live as slaves." "Slaves?" Zarathik seemed genuinely surprised. "We do not make slaves. We preserve and protect. The worlds under our care want for nothing. They are safe, peaceful, and content." "But not free," Helen said quietly. "Freedom is dangerous. The first ones were free, and they destroyed themselves and nearly broke the galaxy. We will not allow their children to repeat that mistake." "Doctor." Walsh had been studying readings from the meeting site, and he made a discovery that changed everything. Commander Zarafik, may I ask you about the ancient structures we found in our oceans? The monitoring stations? They were left by the first ones to watch for the emergence of their children. We've been studying them, and we've found something interesting. The genetic patterns they contain aren't just from the first ones. They're a combination of first one's genetics and something else. Zarafik's expression. The next 72 hours were the most intense in human history. While the Keeper fleet waited in orbit, teams of scientists, engineers, and researchers from around the world worked together to attempt the impossible. They were trying to solve a problem that had stumped the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy for millions of years. Dr. Maya Patel found herself at the center of the effort, working alongside Dr. Alex Thompson and Emma Foster, who had finally returned from the ocean depths. Their makeshift laboratory in the Nevada desert was a chaotic mix of human technology and data from the ancient First One structures. The quantum foam creates interference because we've been trying to push signals through it like it's a solid barrier, Maya explained to the assembled team. But Emma's right. What if we use the foam itself as part of the transmission medium? Like surfing on waves instead of trying to swim through them, Alex added. Emma nodded, her eyes bright with excitement despite her exhaustion. The ancient structures show that the first ones were close to figuring this out. They had created quantum anchors that could stabilize small pockets of spacetime, but they were trying to connect them with straight lines. Straight lines don't work in quantum space, Maya realized. Everything curves, everything flows. We need to follow the natural patterns instead of trying to force our own. Commander Zarafik had established a temporary base near the human research site, watching their work with growing fascination. The alien had brought several Keeper scientists with them, beings who had spent millions of years studying the quantum communication problem. They are approaching this completely wrong, said Science Commander Veltar, Zarafik's chief researcher. They ignore all established protocols. They use randomness where precision is required. And yet, Zarafik observed, they are making progress where we have made none. Captain Ryan Brooks had volunteered his ship, the Shadow, to serve as a test platform for the human experiments. Sophia Martinez and Tyler Johnson worked around the clock to modify the ship's communication systems, according to Maya's specifications. Sophia, I need you to create interference in the quantum field, not eliminate it, Maya explained over the radio. You want me to make the signal worse? Sophia asked, confused. Trust me. Sometimes you have to break something before you can fix it properly. Admiral Morrison watched the experiments from the bridge of the Valiant, his fleet positioned to provide support if anything went wrong. Amy Rodriguez monitored the readings as the Shadow prepared for its first test. Admiral, the modifications are complete, Amy reported. Captain Brooks is ready to attempt galactic range communication. The first test was a disaster. The Shadow's modified communication system created a feedback loop that nearly destroyed the ship's computer systems. Sophia barely managed to shut down the experiment before permanent damage was done. Well, that didn't work, Tyler said with masterful understatement. But Emma was excited rather than discouraged. No, wait, look at the readings. For just a moment, we had a stable connection across 3 light years. It only lasted a few seconds, but it worked. The system collapsed because we were trying to maintain the connection, Maya realized. What if we're not supposed to maintain it? What if galactic communication is supposed to be a series of quick bursts rather than continuous contact? Dr. Alex Thompson was studying the data from the failed test when he made a crucial discovery. The quantum foam didn't resist our signal. It amplified it, but only when the signal was chaotic enough to match the foam's natural patterns. Like resonance, Sophia said from the Shadow. We need to match the frequency of chaos itself. The second test was more successful. the Shadow managed to maintain communication with a probe near Jupiter for almost an hour, using quantum foam as a transmission medium instead of an obstacle. The signal was erratic and required constant adjustment, but it worked. Zarathik and the other keepers were amazed. "This is impossible," Veltar insisted. "Chaos cannot be controlled or predicted. These results should not be achievable." "Maybe that's exactly why they are achievable," Zarathik replied quietly. The breakthrough came during the third test, when Emma suggested combining the human approach with the ancient First One's technology. Instead of using the ocean structures as simple anchors, they would use them as quantum chaos generators, creating controlled randomness that could carry signals across impossible distances. "It's like creating a river of chaos that flows through space," Emma explained. "The message rides the current instead of fighting against it." Maya and her team worked for 18 straight hours to modify their system. When they were ready for the final test, representatives from every major nation on Earth had gathered to watch. President Carter stood next to Commander Zarathik, both leaders understanding that the next few minutes would determine humanity's future. "Shadow, you are cleared for the Galactic Communication Test." Admiral Morrison announced. Captain Brooks activated the modified system, and immediately the readings went wild. But this time, instead of collapsing, the chaos stabilized into a flowing pattern that stretched across space like a river of light. "Communication established," Sophia reported, her voice filled with wonder. "We have stable contact with I don't know where. The signal is bouncing through quantum foam across the entire galaxy." The response came from a world on the far side of the Milky Way, from a civilization that had been isolated for millions of years. Their message was simple but profound. "Hello. We have been waiting so long to hear another voice." Within minutes, responses were coming from dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Ancient civilizations that had been cut off from each other for eons were suddenly able to communicate. The galaxy, which had been a collection of isolated islands, was becoming a connected community. Commander Zarathik stood in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Finally, the alien spoke. "In 3 days, you have accomplished what we could not achieve in millions of years. You have connected the galaxy." "We didn't do it alone," President Carter replied. "We used the foundation that the First Ones and your people built. We just found a different way to use it. A chaotic way. An unpredictable way. A human way." Dr. Walsh approached the alien commander. "Commander, this success proves something important. Chaos and order don't have to be enemies. They can work together to create something neither could achieve alone." Zarathik looked at the humans gathered around the test site, seeing them with new understanding. "The First Ones created you to be different from them, and different from us. They gave you the ability to find strength in randomness, to create order from disorder. And you've been trying to preserve the galaxy by eliminating that randomness," Admiral Morrison said. "But maybe the galaxy needs a little chaos to keep growing." The Keeper Commander was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Our mission was to preserve and protect the children of the First Ones. But perhaps true preservation requires allowing growth, even when that growth is unpredictable." Emma stepped forward, data pad in hand. "Commander, the ancient structures contain more than just communication technology. They have templates for dozens of other problems that the First Ones couldn't solve. Problems that might yield to human-style solutions." "What kind of problems?" "Energy distribution across galactic distances. Faster than light travel that doesn't require massive ships. Medical treatments that work with biological chaos instead of against it." Emma's voice grew more excited as she spoke. "The First Ones left us a galaxy full of puzzles to solve." President Carter looked at Commander Zarathik. "What do you say?" Are you willing to work with us instead of protecting us from ourselves? The alien scales shifted through a complex pattern of colors before settling into a new configuration that none of the humans had seen before. The Keeper Armada has spent millions of years creating a galaxy of perfect, safe, static worlds. Perhaps it is time to try something different. A partnership. Admiral Morrison asked. An experiment, Zarathic replied. We will provide the wisdom of ages and the resources of a galactic civilization. You will provide the chaos and creativity that we have forgotten how to access. Maya looked up from her monitoring station. Commander, we're already getting requests from other worlds to help them solve problems they've been stuck on for centuries. It seems like the galaxy has been waiting for someone to try new approaches. Then let us begin, Zarathic said. Let us see what chaos and order can build together. As the Keeper ships began to reconfigure themselves from an invasion force into an exploration fleet, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the alien vessels prepare for a very different kind of mission. Amy, set course. For the first world on our list, he ordered. Let's go solve some impossible problems. The Draconian Armada had entered Earth's orbit as conquerors. They were leaving as partners in humanity's greatest adventure, proving that sometimes the best way to preserve something precious is to let it grow wild and free dot in the deep ocean. The ancient structures of the first ones pulsed with new energy. Their million-year wait finally over. Their children had learned the lesson they had died to teach, that perfection was the enemy of progress, and that sometimes you had to embrace chaos to reach for the stars. The galaxy was about to discover what humans had a